You're warmly welcome to this webinar where we'll briefly discuss about organizational research data stewardship services. I think we could all introduce ourselves. Could you, Yen, please start?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Yen Wang. I'm from Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. My role is Data Stewardship Coordinator. So I'm coordinating our fantastic data stewards team. I'm also coordinating between our data steward team and any other university services that's related to data and software management. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Reed Bain, and I'm the Research Data Systems Manager at Purdue University in the US. And I work with our Purdue University Research Repository and also work with folks around the university for research data stewardship and research data services.
Hi all, I'm Antti Rousi and my title is the Data Advisor at Aalto University, Finland, but I mostly do coordination between different service units. So I coordinate the data agent network, which is kind of our version of the data steward network. And I try to work as closely as I can with the other service units as well. And then the question and answers are moderated by Dr. Anne Suunikka, my colleague. There's Anne, hi.
Yeah, hi. Let's hope that we get lots of questions at the end of the presentations.
I think I can start by the practicalities. I'll let you know them rather briefly. So we will have a presentation segment and then a Q&A section. So we will record the presentation segment and we'll release it openly during the summer. Therefore, the microphones and cameras of the participants are turned off during this, not to record your personal data. You can ask questions in the chat, and after the presentation, we will do a segment, a Q&A segment based on the questions in the chat. And as mentioned, the chat and questions are moderated by Dr. Anne Suunikka, and then Charlotte Forsgaard is our technical host of the webinar. And foremost, thanks a lot for participating. It's our pleasure to present this material to you. So before I let Yen talk more about the TU Delft case, I would like to kind of briefly introduce you to the design or the idea that we had. In general, it's somewhat easy to describe or model the data stewardship services as such, like what is the team of data stewards and what they do. But I think it's perhaps more elusive and more interesting to try to see the institutional arrangements and the research environments in which the different models occur. So we try to not only kind of describe how we have arranged data stewardship in our universities, but also describe the research environments from which they have emerged. And I think the idea is really simple. We don't try to see a causality or correlation between the environment and the models, but the idea is much more simple. It's just to describe both the model and the environment. And I think we believe that alone would be helpful to others. And I think it's interesting to see that what we mean by data stewardship varies between our case universities and the research environments also vary. So I found this quite a fascinating investigation, and we looked the research environment and the institutional arrangement through a framework from Cox and all. So we looked at 4 aspects, which I think it was originally a research data service maturity model. So we looked at policy and governance, research data services and establishment funding and structures, advocacy, advisory and support research data services, and then technical research data services. So we tried to kind of model both the data stewardship work and also the environment in which they occur. And they included case study universities are TU Delft from the Netherlands, Purdue from North America, and Aalto from Finland. And now what we have next is then TU Delft's case study, and I'll give the floor to Yen.
Thanks so much, Antti. happy to share our story at TU Delft about data stewardship services. Next slide, please. First, a little factual information about our university. So we are in the Delft in the Netherlands. It's one of the oldest and largest technical university in the Netherlands for the Dutch standard. We have 8 faculties. Some are much bigger than the other ones, but 8 faculties basically cross science, engineering, and design domains. We do also have some research groups in social science, humanities, but they are kind of scattered across all the faculties. And then I basically copied some information from our website about the size of the university. Maybe nice to mention that we have a personnel, employees, more than 6,000, and 62% of them are scientific staff, and 40% of them are international staff. So we are quite international university and international research environment. Next slide, please. A few important policies and the governance related regulations that in relation to open science, data management, and open access publishing that really guide and influence the work that we're doing on the topic. Since 2016, the university has a policy on open access publishing. So that basically researchers from TU Delft, you publish the article, and then you need to make a version open access in our institutional repository. And around 2017 and 18, that was kind of the booming period, both at national, EU, and institutional level. That's really the start of open science movement, research fair data, and later on software, fair software movement. So that's is reflected in our strategic framework for the 4 years across 2018 to 24. At the same time, basically simultaneously at both institutional and national level, we started developing different guidance on policy on data management, on software management, on research integrity. And that is quite aligned, of course, with the movement at the European level regarding the privacy GDPR regulation and open data directive, and also about copyright that's related to the publications. Next slide, please. So for research data services, our university library is taking lead and is the main driving force behind all the service provisions. We have a dedicated team on research data and software that is under the research services within the library. And there you can see in the graph that we have dedicated members on RDM related training, data managers, and also data steward and data stewardship coordinator. So as a team, in terms of services, we provide training services, we provide a few applications related to data management. We take lead in developing and implementing policies and related workflows at university level, and we collaborate with other teams across the university. And an important part of that is the coordination of the data stewardship. The next slide, please. Just to make maybe clarification. So as Antti mentioned, there are sometimes interchangeable definition about research data services and data stewardship services. So for us, this is slightly different things. So the scope of our data stewardship is slightly smaller or somehow overlap with the research data services. So you can see our data steward team actually across library and faculties. So we have, since 2017, we started a 2-year pilot project to appoint dedicated full-time data steward at faculty level, and the library is taking a coordination role with the team to coordinate between the faculty and at university level. Since 2020, this pilot project became a standard service. So all the data steward positions are fully funded by the faculties. Recently, we just appoint another central data stewards at the library. So now this is the complete picture of the team of the data stewards, including also the coordinator, myself. Next slide, please. A very brief introduction about the work scope of data steward. I think that's very crucial to also to introduce the services. So for faculty data stewards, they, depending on the faculty specifics, they might do different things and with different focuses. But in general, across all the faculties, they provide consultation, support, and tooling to researchers. And they do faculty level training and education for researchers and students. And they take lead in developing and implementing faculty level policy strategy, and they of course also contribute to the university level policy strategy making, and they also spend some time engaging with the research communities or engage with other fellow data steward communities. And the role of the library data steward is slightly different. So this person will work closely with the faculty data steward, also supporting all the work they've been doing, and also at the same time, the library data steward will take more lead on innovation project on improving the data stewardship services together with the faculty data stewards. Next slide, please. And the work scope of myself, the coordinator, I do 2 levels of coordination. One is at the team level, so we need some internal team management coordination. We have weekly catch up with each other to know what's happening at each faculty, what are the demands, what are the needs, and what are the specific things we need to discuss together, exchange best practices. And there are also university level coordination that is more to align with other central services like ICT, privacy, ethics that have a lot of support and influence on the work we do to provide data management support to researchers, and also take lead in developing and implementing RDM-related service policies. Also collaborate with other national and international communities on the topic. And the improvement, innovation, reflection about data stewardship, such as professionalizing data stewardship. Next slide, please. Of course, data steward team is not the only team that work on research data services at our university. So you might, please don't be overwhelmed by the detailed information here. The purpose is more to introduce, there are many other university service teams. They all have a connection with providing the research data services. And that includes several services from the library on training, publishing, repository. We also have a digital competence center that is a collaboration between IT and the library. So they have a dedicated team of data manager and research software engineers. They really work together with researchers on a specific research project to provide hands-on support and co-create best practices and digital competencies and transfer that to the research community. We do have IT and security teams, and they provide the basic storage, which is fundamental data management services, storage backup and other tooling and platforms that are related, and also guidance on security, information security. We have a privacy team, which is about privacy issues, and ethics committee with handling all the ethical issues in research activities, legal services on IPR, license, and ownership of research data and software. Grant office, so they work with researchers in grant proposals and where you already need to address data management and software open science issues in many grant proposals. Corresponding to founders' requirements. And of course, most importantly, institutional management. So the management team at the faculty, also university level, they should be the big advocate on all the things we are doing. And we try to also convince them with the new requirements or policies or directions in the field. And next slide, please. This is just a visual representation of what I just introduced in the previous slides. So maybe one thing to mention or highlight the role of data stewardship services in the overall landscape is we are kind of the linking pin between different services at operational level. So on a daily basis, we have a very frequent contact with all different teams for different matters. as I mentioned earlier, for each team, the specialties. And next slide, please. And for advocacy, advisory, and support research services, on daily basis, researchers have direct contact with data stewards. So they need to know who the data stewards in their faculty are and get contact with them via either functional or personal email contact. As the data steward team, we also have a functional shared inbox that's for general questions. So people, they can find that on the website, and they can, if they don't know the faculty data steward, they can send general questions to us, and we're gonna forward it to the dedicated faculty data stewards or other colleagues who should be in contact with. We do also have alignment meetings with the different library teams and also other university services team. Here is another again to list all the other teams who are our crucial partners in providing the service together. Next slide, please. The last is a few technical research data services. So at the institutional level, a few services are provided either by library or ICT or more at a national level. For the data repository, so 40 research data, it is our institutional data repository, but this is also a shared service with all the technical universities in the Netherlands, but the repository is hosted in our institution. We have DMP Online for data management plan. We have two different eLab journal and RSpace for electronic notebooks. So these are the applications provided by the library team. And then the ICT provide the data storage options with both in-house development and some external applications and version control. And we have a high performance computing center who provide HPC services. We do also have a collaboration with several national services, and of course that also be widely used by all the Dutch researchers. That is DANS, the national data repository, mainly for social science and humanities, but they also expanding the scope at the moment. And SURF is another important IT facility provider. And ESA and Center, they do a lot of training, especially on focus on software management. I think that's the end of my case. I will hand it to Reed, please. You need to unmute yourself.
It would help, wouldn't it? Thank you, Yen. So I'm going to share the work that we do here at Purdue University. Next slide, please. So to start off, I'll give you a little bit of background about Purdue. We are a large public land grant institution in West Lafayette, Indiana, which is a very small town in the Northwest, about 2 hours outside of Chicago. To mention what a public land grant institution is, it means that the federal government in the mid to late 1800s gave federal land to the state, and part of that was to create universities that really focused on things like engineering, agriculture, what they called practical professions. And so as you can imagine, engineering is the huge focus at our university. Kind of a cool fact is that Amelia Earhart was on the faculty, as well as Neil Armstrong, who was walking on the moon. And so let's see, we have a heavy focus in terms of partnering with industry, as well as looking at grant-based research from the federal government. And these are things that really, I guess, kind of drive or trying to think of the right word, help us to understand more about some of the services that we do. So you can see we have a large body of students, and something kind of cool, we have 14 different libraries throughout the university, as well as a lot of research labs. And that also is kind of something that plays a huge role in the stewardship and data management practices. Next slide, please. So looking at policy and governance, and I think this is really interesting as we contrast with Yen and with Antti, is that a lot of our policies are coming directly from the federal government, and they really are related to grant-funded research. So we call these, they're coming from the Office of Science and Technology Policy, or OSTP memos. The first one happened in 2013, and this was where the government basically said, you know, hey, agencies, we need you all to develop a plan to then instate a policy that says that researchers who get funding from your agency need to be able to share, maybe need to be able to make this publicly accessible to the country openly. And so that was really kind of the impetus for a lot of services that came up within the library around research data management. And then there was another one that happened in 2023, so just recently. And now we're looking to maximize that sharing even more and to think about, you know, equitability. And so that has really been something that is slowly evolving to think about things like removing embargoes and really looking at things like repositories and things like that. So as you can imagine, the data management and sharing plan is required. And that's a lot of what we do in terms of support, is helping people to understand what's going to be best for them contextually, and then preparing that to really explain their research and their needs in that context. Thinking about a lot of the other components are looking mostly at security and protection, and these are drivers of policy at the institution, and then really focus on how the data is handled. And you all may be familiar with these or heard about them already. We have FERPA, which looks at student privacy. And so this is a big kind of important part of our institution when we do a lot of studies with students and things like that, as well as the protected health information with HIPAA. And so then we also do a lot focusing on responsible conduct of research and research integrity. And so this is part of the institutional review board process. And so they are also someone that we will partner from time to time, because that is one of their focuses, is how are you managing your data throughout the project. Next slide, please. So to give you a basic overview and a little bit of history about our research data services, we were a fairly early adopter in library services for researchers. And over time, this has really evolved to, you'll see with the structure of our team in our department. One of the things that came along with this was the Purdue University Research Repository. And so what we are doing here is to provide that venue for data sharing, and also have a platform with some storage and collaborative space to promote that collaboration within and without, or externally to the institution. So let's see, and so that's been around since 2012. So we're at our 10-year point, which is a point when we're doing a lot of evaluation and assessment and things like that. And to look at our department, one of the things that is fairly unique, I would say, about our library is that we also have a school of information. And so this actually kind of has these two components of our department. We both work with researchers in different ways. So the area where I am is the research data staff, and we are a lot of the focus on the research repository. And that is not to say that the faculty don't also work with the repository, but we are the management and sustainment and data quality aspects of that work. So we have me, and I do a lot of the partnership around campus and raising awareness, as well as understanding how we keep that sustainability over time and how we work with our data within that system. And we also have our data curator and our software developer, and they are fantastic at the work that they do in terms of keeping both the data quality and integrity, as well as that sustainability and custom tools for the work that we do. And for the research faculty, they are professors, so they will teach across semesters, undergraduate usually courses, and they are themselves scholarly researchers, so they are working very hard on that as tenured professors, but they also serve roles as subject liaisons, so they are really focusing very deeply in on certain subjects, while we are more of a campus collaborator across campus. So we kind of work in that flexible realm of general ideas, but then digging a little deeper to understand contextual aspects. And then, of course, we partner across campus, and it's pretty much essential for the work that we do. Next slide. And so, like Yen showed you, we have our different partners here. So we have our team where we're doing a lot of consultation, a lot of data sharing and oversight of the repository. And then we work with a group called Sponsored Programs, where they are really focusing on grant proposals and oversight of those grants over time. And really that contains a lot of data stewardship components. And so they will often recommend folks to us, and we will connect with them depending on the specific query. And another part is the research office, and they are kind of the overarching administrative force behind research activities that are happening. So they are doing a lot of work both on funding, they do internal grants, and also thinking about our responsible conduct in research and research integrity. And so they'll do a lot of training in those areas, which do some focus on data integrity, but also span the gamut of research. IT, of course, is somebody that is really essential to what we are working on, looking at aspects of high performance computing, visualization, a lot of the larger scale storage, as well as administration of those systems. And I think one of the cool things that we've built over time is this connection between the repository and some of the infrastructure with the research computing group, as well as specialized services. And ag data is a wonderful example of this. And they really support agriculture and the related disciplines around that, where they're looking working with the labs and doing planning and workflow automation and other aspects that are really highly contextualized there. And I think one of the really interesting things that we've discussed in our work together is looking at our definitions of stewardship and who is a data steward, and how we, these titles that we have and the definitions kind of are, very similar in other ways, very different in other ways. So we have campus data stewards that really focus in on specific areas, and folks will come to them, especially around security and compliance with all the different practices. Next slide. And to give you an overview of the work that we do on a little bit deeper level, we usually get queries through our personal email or through these two different lists or inboxes that will come in to the groups. One is more specifically related to research data queries. The other is more focused on repository, but generally we get both in both areas. And so we maintain those. And then we'll do consultations across the board in terms of any questions that people have, whether it's data sharing, data management, connecting with other resources around the university. And then, of course, data management plans are one of the big aspects of that. Similar to Yen's tool that she mentioned, we have a DMP tool. And so this is really getting access to different templates, as well as kind of this online platform that you can break things down. And then folks will often submit their plan to me and or to subject liaisons to do that review and give as much input as we can. And the repository itself really has some storage for folks that are working with their projects. So that is something that we also have as part of the work that we do. So a lot of workshops and training specifically around data sharing and the overarching general aspects. A lot of times we'll get requests and then we'll customize that a little bit more. And let's see, so we have the repository service and then the per interface or the per online presence also contains a lot of that guidance where folks can use that themselves. Next slide, please. And this is a glimpse at the technical technical resources that we either provide or some of the partnerships that we work with. And this really runs the gamut from very localized services to larger scale cyber infrastructure needs. So we've really talked about a lot of these institutional services. And we also have a storage finder tool. And Yen, I'd love to look at yours too, because I wonder how they would look similarly or differently. And of course, we have our research computing storage options that folks are using consistently. We have a repository, and then we have subscriptions like GitLab, and we have the Readbox is part of Box, and that really is the secure space where people work with their HIPAA, FERPA, federally controlled data to secure human and personally identifiable information. We are a member of the Open Science Framework for Institutions, so we partner with them, and that's really open. We have our major open place is our data repository, but this provides another realm of that as well, and doing some transfer through products like Globus. And then we have some regional partnerships throughout the Midwest where we'll have computing resources. There are specific specialties. One kind of area that might be a very prevalent area is the medical data. We have this database called EPIC, where a lot of health information is stored about human subjects, as well as subscriptions like RedCap, which really are some of that secure data collection. And a lot of times those things come through partnerships with other institutions. And a lot of times through the grant process, there's a lot of I can never remember that, but it's these across institutional collaborations. And so that will trade back and forth or share these resources. And then at the national and international level, a lot of times a government agency has labs, and folks will go to those labs to actually work within there and share their that computing time and that storage and archiving. The federal agencies have archives as well, and some of that secondary data then comes in to combine with other research that's happening. So there's also not-for-profit, and these are things where it's not a central thing, but it is a kind of diverse thing that happens across the university, because folks are within those 400 labs that get that funding or work within that federal partnership. Let's see. And so I think that is all that I have. And I'd like to send that over to Antti for his part.
Thank you, Reid, and thank you, Jan. It was really interesting to hear your case studies. I'll go through the Aalto case study next, and then we together present a summary or a conclusion of our work. So Aalto is a somewhat new university. It was formed through the merger of Helsinki University of Technology, Helsinki School of Business, and Helsinki University of Arts and Design. So although we are formed through a merger, we are still a relatively small university compared to, for example, Purdue and Helsinki University of Helsinki. I think it's a cool fun, to me, it's a cool fun fact that our vice rector of research comes from the School of Arts and Design, and it's often the School of Arts and then the Department of Computer Science that, in my knowledge, fare the best in these international rankings. So yes, and then let's see. So like TU Delft and Purdue, we also have our own policies and a history of developing these policies, and the current one includes publication data and software and methods. So they've been the institutional policies have been key in kind of I think in kind of making the community aware of these type of important issues. But what I think is quite what I would like to point out, that within the context of Finland, there's a lot of national open science policy that are done together. So the community led by Finnish Society of Finnish Learned Societies, they kind of coordinate this policy forming, and we try to form them together nationally, which I think is kind of cool. So you can look at the Finnish national open science policies. I think that to my knowledge is quite specific. And then the funder policies are of course important, and otherwise our context is of course very similar to TU Delft, where the EU legislation and research funding plays a major part. So regards to data stewardships, we have Aalto data agents, our version of the data stewards. So they are researchers. They are typically staff scientists or postdocs who receive a partial salary compensation for their activities. So the salary compensation ranges from 10 to 50, and we also have voluntary. Some of them are voluntary. So in general, I think that all universities strive for high quality centralized services. Like every self-respecting university wants to have those really strong departments, centralized departments. But also sometimes I feel like this is maybe just me, but having worked in the centralized services myself, sometimes the researchers' initial problem or the idea has to be adapted to what the centralized services can offer. And then when you have these embedded services that consist of researchers, then the deviation from the original problem that they had, that I claim there's less. And I guess my summary would be that these embedded researchers, the researcher services and centralized services, they complement each other very, very well. That's maybe the basis of Aalto's data stewardship program. So to have this researcher element also in the centralized services. So we have all from each schools, and you can see some of their. I hope you we have the training series. So if you want to know more in detail what they know each, then I suggest you would look at webinar series and look at YouTube for the published materials, and also of course this lecture will be eventually then published in YouTube as well. So the way I see it is very similar to what Reid and presented already. So it's kind of a network of networks the research data management services and initiatives as well. So we have the data agents, and some of them are part of Aalto Science IT, which is the infrastructures for high-level computational research, similar to what also Reid and Ian discussed. And then we have the Open Science and Acris team. I think this is probably a peculiarity of Aalto, that we don't have a library organization as such. So this is maybe something different. So the library services or the organization is part of the research services, whereas we don't have a separate organization for libraries. And then of course we have the IT services and the legal services. But it's quite similar to what I think having a history in being a technical school or engineering focused school like we. Of course, there's relevancy in computational research and HPC services. And then again, very similar. Like we have a joint email, or you can contact data agents directly. The Aalto research software engineers, which I probably should have discussed more in detail. So whereas Aalto data agents are part-time, the research software engineers are full-time. There's a team of approximately 5 people that work full-time with research software engineers, and maybe conceptually with Richard Darst, who's the leader of that team, we kind of discussed that they are also data agents in a way. So we don't want to make we're a small university and teams are quite small, so we don't want to have them in separate silos, because it's such an essential part of the data agent needs the software engineers and vice versa. And then we have so they have their own email, but they can also be contacted through this joint email. And then we do the webinar series, as I really mentioned, and then we do the drop-in clinic, which was run by Science IT and the RSCs, but since many of them are also part of the data agent, so we kind of adopted that as well, but very similar to what Ian and Reid already presented. And then regarding the technical services, so those who are interested in the design, I think it was pretty late that we decided not to maybe discuss international services, these general type repositories, but when we want to kind of focus on our aim in the national and institutional services. So Aalto Data Hub I think it's interesting. So it aims to increase the use of licensed data. So for example, in economics, you might buy data sets that's reusable within the university, but sometimes they get bought by groups and then no one else knows about them. So they aim to make these licensed data sets more visible. And then we have Aalto Materials Database, which is kind of an advanced electronic lab notebook for material science. And then we have Aalto Scientific Computing, as mentioned, Aalto Lab Notebook, the GitLab version control. And I view the current research information systems as quite important for open science related, and we are developing a lot of repository for long-term preservation. So archive is leading in that. Our archives is leading in that initiative. But I think it's also good to point out that within the Finnish context, there's a lot of federated national services, for example, the CSC, which is really important to us. So it doesn't make, in our context, it doesn't make a lot of sense to develop a lot of infrastructure in single universities, but we try to do them at the national level, and CSC is a great example of a lot of kind of centralized, for example, high performance computing related services, but a lot more as well. So I think that's something that is very. I think it's similar to what Jens said, but maybe even more within the context of Finland. I'm not sure. We have to examine it a bit more. But then we have the Finnish Social Science Data Archive and FinData, for example, to mention a few. But yeah, I would say that in Finland, the federated services play a large role, and it makes a lot of sense. But I think we could then proceed to the summary. I think maybe I give the floor to Yen.
Yes, I will try to do some summary by comparing the three cases, but please just add because it's, as you all have heard, the three cases actually varies a lot. But let me give a try. Please, next slide, please. So we try to as we present each case from the same four aspects, so we try to summarize them also by putting things in the same table. It's a lot of information, but I think there are a lot of similarities and of course differences as well. So regarding the policy and governance, we all have general institutional policies regarding, I think, regarding data or open science or software. That's quite well aligned, and of course well aligned with the national initiative as well. And as Reid mentioned, in Purdue, it's heavily influenced by the federal agency based focus on security and on integrity. I think those elements are also here in Europe, but just reflected and maybe formulated in a slightly different way. But in general, I think we all have open access data and software in the core of the policy and the strategy across all the institutions here. The data service establishment, funding, and structures, that looks very different. Although I think the core elements are all there. So we have dedicated RDM professional staff. And how this is structured, how it is positioned across each institution varies a lot. And also I think in terms of organizational setting, that's also very different. For example, Aalto doesn't have a library as an organizational unit, but you do have research services. That's the same as we all have. And in Purdue, you have actually very unique combination of a library and schools. So there you have a joint staff as professors, but also as the RDM professionals. And in Delft, we have mainly the library led, but then the data steward embedded. But in all, we are considered as a support staff, but we try to also get close and engage with the research community. So yeah, that's how we establish each services. And the advocacy, advisory, and support research data services, I think that I would say I repeat the same point as how the service is established. So we do have personal contact with the researchers, with the client, with the users. And we also have a functional and a general inbox to communicate. And then we do engage with the communities a lot. I think one way or another, but that's the common approach there. And technical services, I also have the impression that basically the core data services are the same. The storage, backup, version control, lab notebook for certain disciplines are all there. And of course, we may use different applications, and certain services might be located at either institutional level or national level. That's really depending on the country-specific things. But I think in terms of type of technical data services, we have very much the same type of the services available. That's the very short summary, and I hope that gives some good impression to all the audience here. So next slide, please. This is something I would really like to highlight. So despite all the differences you've just heard in terms of how the service is structured, but we identified actually the challenges are quite common. It's very the same across the continent, across countries. So first is the sustainability issue of organizing such services, having such professional people, positions in place, because the data stewards-like role are very new. And there isn't much to what I'm aware of, that there isn't very clear career path globally for such a new role. And also many people had research background, but then switched to the role of data steward Many people may also leave after a few years working, so it's a high turnover in such role, and there isn't any standard way of recruiting for such staff or keep the staff for long term. And funding is another issue, because sometimes funding is very related to standardize the services, and for such new type of service, either at project funding or like regular funding is not very common everywhere across all places. Then more at the operational level, so coordination is really a key issue there, or challenge. As you've seen in all three cases, it's not just one or two teams providing the service, it's a network. So it's an ecosystem, how to coordinate, how to build up the relationship with each service provider, either at the operational level, at strategic level. That's really something new for all of us. So we spend a lot of effort there. And also there are also some very concrete operational issues, like we have multiple way of connecting with the research communities. How do we manage such communication? Like multiple email addresses, sometimes we overlook things, or how do you want to people get contact with certain RDM professional support staff, or like professional staff, use personal emails or use functional emails. So those are very trivial questions, but that can also cause a lot of challenge on daily basis when coordinating the services. And also the boundary of responsibility between different service teams is not very clear, because for some teams, research data services is very relevant, but for other teams, maybe this is something very new or a bit distant from them. For example, legal services, they know there's legal issue with the research data, but they don't need to face researchers on daily basis every day to solve this issue. That's very different from maybe privacy team, that they have much more questions on daily basis to solve, to provide support. So clarifying such boundary of responsibilities is also challenging across all different universities, regardless of how the service is structured. The last and also probably the most crucial issue is the capacity, because everything started probably within the last 7 to 10 years. So being a new type of service, we discover new issues on daily basis. Over time, basically, the things end up in our shoulder, in our desk, is just more and more complex. Also, in terms of both the amount and diversity. And we need to also constantly learn more. And that also gives the challenge of how do we shape the service? What's the scope of the service, of the support we provide? And that's kind of a very dynamic thing happening at the moment. So there is such evolving demand, and we need to constantly cope with such demand. And how do we provide and make sure that there's sufficient capacity, and in terms of both the competencies and also the staff. So that's a common challenge everywhere. That's actually what we've heard so far from all three cases. Enough challenges. I would now head to Reid. So there will also be some very nice recommendations for everyone here. So Reid, please.
Thanks, Yan. I think this was one of the really nice things about being able to talk together and have these conversations, was that we looked at our challenges and kind of said, well, what are the big things that we would like to know, when we're working with these things, and what can we share with everybody here? And one of the things that we really saw was a lot of the need for that kind of knowledge and examination of your specific arrangements within an institution and what your research environment looks like, because you can see the differences between our groups. So this is something that you'll really, it'll be really helpful to pay attention to that organizational specificity. And then I really like this one, this idea of the building of relationships, and that collaboration that really involves strategy, and that this really goes beyond that internal structure, internal organization, depending on, it doesn't matter what type of expertise you have, that these are really important to integrate, and that's not something to be underestimated. And then thinking about our initiatives and the models that we work with, excuse me, that a lot of times it's difficult to kind of get a sense of what is beneficial versus the cost that happens, and how we structure things around that balance. And so I think across our communities, this is a really thing that we would like to explore and understand how that will work for us. And so those are our 3 big recommendations. And I think at this point, we're ready to begin our discussion and to hear about all the questions from you all. I've been seeing a whole lot of activity in the chat, and I'm really excited.
Thanks to everybody thanks to all of you for your great presentations. It really showed how different the setup can be. If I start with it's a question and a comment as well. There are quite many different titles that are being used. You have data stewards, you have data curation personnel, you have data managers, data agents, data advisors, and we actually got a couple of new suggestions: data angel and data research data guru as well. So what do you think? Will these titles converge when the industry is sort of more mature, or the position is more mature, or should they converge? Would it be easier to discuss these things when everybody knows what is referred to, what kind of competence is referred then when you talk about research manager or data manager or data steward? What do you think? Would everybody like to offer your comments?
Well, I'm happy to start. I think in ideal world, of course, if we use the same language, that would be perfect. But that's probably will not be the reality within short. I'm not even sure within 10 years if that will be the case, because that's actually something I discussed very often with with colleagues from different countries. During the RDA in Sweden, I just discovered there they call data manager is the manager of data steward, but here we call data manager actually someone who do more hands-on work. I think just I think for workaround, we just clarify things briefly right before we start a conversation. So that's probably would be the most practical way I would do before really standardizing the terms, because then when you standardize the 10 existing terms, the 11th will pop up. That's my view on this. I don't think we're going to solve the issue, but of course the willingness is there, but we also need to be pragmatic about the diversity of just the titles there. That's probably the reality at the moment.
Right. What about Reid or Antti? Do you have additional comments?
Oh, yeah. This is really interesting. And again, I can totally relate to what you're saying, and I think one of the things we talked about was what does it mean to be a steward versus focusing on data management or a data manager or a data management professional or any of those terms. Is there's an institutional aspect of that. There's I would imagine a national or international aspects of that. And then I think there's also a personal philosophy as well of how do I work with people? What do people need, and how do I provide that in terms of my mindset and then what I recommend? And so when I think about that, it sounds like we could really, talk about an overarching thing, but then also, I don't know that we'll ever get some of those very deeply embedded organizational definitions that do run that gamut. So that would be what I would say.
Okay, thanks.
I think it's a great comment, like, and Yen and Reed elaborated, I think, it really well. So I think I hope there will be some sort of solidification of some of the terms. So just to give you an example, I think that we use the data agent term because we used to have innovation agents in Aalto. So we kind of adapted the model from actually the innovation side and then put it in the research data. So, but it sounds like a fun research question, like what are all the kind of titles that are used and what are meant by that. But let's not go with it. Thank you. That was a good question.
Yeah, and actually there's a comment to this question about titles. They don't all do the same thing. So we have different titles because the job responsibilities are a bit different. They differ. Right. Yeah. So maybe we do need more than one title. Maybe we need more than data steward. One really, really interesting question was the key performance indicators of data stewards, or actually I think the whole data stewardship, the service. What kind of how do you measure success of data stewardship in your universities? Would you read wanna start this time?
Oh, sure. And, this is something that I think a lot of, I've worked at some different institutions, and this has been something that we're always asking questions about. This I think would be another great place for doing some research together. We, traditionally have this need to do quantitative evaluation of what does it mean to be successful? What are the outcomes? What do we see as our standard measures that we can say we're successful? But also this idea of relationship building, I think, comes a lot into play as in terms of the contextual aspect of our institutions. So that's that kind of qualitative understanding within the body of, say, the institution or the library, where we're focusing a lot on, revenue and bringing in success and things like that. That doesn't talk about the relationship. So I think that that can be difficult, but I think there's also ways that we can start to think about, what does relationship building look like in terms of these key indicators of success. So big question.
I can follow up. I think there's a development in Finland where we try to measure the research data aspect quantitatively of the research outputs nationally, but that I think it's still under work. What that's a good question, and we try to do measurable activities at Aalto. So the number of webinars, the registration numbers, and then the number of visits. How many visits have we done? There's and number of tickets solved. So you can have this kind of maybe ground metrics. But as we discussed with Jen and Reed, it might be difficult to adapt. Like, for example, I know the research software engineers at Aalto say they use this data. Like, how many hours did this save you? Like, how many hours did our work save researchers' time in different? And it's a really smart thing to do, but it seems quite difficult to do because data as such is so varied. I think we could learn from the research software engineers, but I don't have really answers or solutions to it yet. But it's definitely a very, very good question and
something to examine.
Yeah.
What about Yen? Have you got some established KPIs?
No, we don't have KPI. That's the short answer. But we've been talking about how do we evaluate, not reevaluate, how do we say we are successful? How well, or if we have any way to tell how well we are doing. I remember a few years ago when we tried to convince the university board about because we transitioned from a project to a standard service. So when we try to convince the management to say that we are successful, we are important, we use the different thing. We can measure the number of consultations or number of researchers we help with, and we can also tell case stories like people appreciate our work. So it's always a mix of quantitative measure, but quantitative measure only tells something you've done, but doesn't tell how well you are doing. And the qualitative ones is very hard to collect, and it's it takes a much more effort to analyze, but that actually tell the quality of the work. We don't measure our success at the moment. It's also partially really, first is the very hard to define the metrics, in what way and what will be the key and that key KPI. That's definitely something worth investigating, worth to develop. I think as a mature service, we need such thing. On the other hand, it also depends on the objective we set for providing such service, because one main objective for our data stewardship service is to raise awareness. How would you measure that? That's very hard to measure. So that's very different from if you set the objectives like we want every single researcher to make a DMP for their research. Then you can easily measure. So yeah, I don't have an answer for such question, but it's definitely it's one of the important things to work on for sure.
Actually, there's a very insightful follow-up questions regarding this. About, do you have examples of qualitative measures of stories that highlight the impact of university-wide stewardship services? So this is exactly what you were describing, that it's not enough to calculate numbers, but we should understand the situation more profoundly and take maybe case stories there to describe what has been done successfully and maybe what could be improved as well. I don't know if you want to maybe at the end of this, we still have got sort of more practical, shorter questions, but if you want to, we could listen to your sort of success stories of what you are proud of in your universities, what you have succeeded or where you have succeeded well. But let's take sort of shorter questions first, and then I'll ask you at the end of this session. I ask the sort of a good qualitative description of something that you are very proud of in your organization. There was a question about funding sources, and we talked about it a bit already. Did I understand it correctly, Reid and Yen? Your people are full-time people, so they are paid sort of normal salary. And with us, we pay a portion of the person's salary from research services, and these people are employed in departments. And I think Yen already mentioned that you also use project funding sometimes, or
so for now we don't, for the data steward position we don't use project funding anymore, but for other type of RDM professional roles, some of them still on project funding.
Yeah. That's similar here, is that we don't usually use project funding, that we're funded through the library, and in some cases some other units. Not at this time, I don't think, but one of the things that does happen sometimes, if somebody has a grant and they want to have a collaborator and they have money to budget for that, then they will come to us, and we need to get approval through our organization.
There's a follow-up question about do we charge researchers for using our services? Does anybody? No, yeah. I think it would be in the case that you would need sort of a person for a longer period of time, for example, in the project, then the project would pay for the pay of this person. But otherwise, I think it's a sort of a standard service that we are happy to provide. And how many these short questions? How many data stewards, or whatever you call them in your organizations, do you have in your organizations? And are they in every faculty, or in our case, in every school?
So for us, we have 8 faculties and 1 faculty-like institution. So there is at least 1 data steward per faculty. We have 3 faculties. They started since last year hiring the second one because they are large faculty. They're really increasing demand. So they realized this, and so we have 3 faculties with 2 data stewards and the rest 1 data steward full time.
We have data agents within all schools. There's currently 11, and but the compensation varies. But yes. So did I answer the question? Was that the full?
Yeah, you did ask the question. Thank you.
We here within the library and in the research repository, there are 3 of us that are our staff members. So we're a very small group between me and the data curator and our software developer. And then with faculty, they will oftentimes have multiple different liaison responsibilities or connections that they will. So and I can't think of how many we have of those, but there, I think we have many that are, I would say maybe 5 that are devoted more to the research data management aspects of services. But all of the liaisons will oftentimes connect folks with us too.
Right. There was a comment on the services that the services might seem like isolated islands rather than sort of evenly distributed in the universities. Yeah. And do we know how our researchers use RDM services? Are those who have found the services, are they very well served? And actually there is like 90% of the researchers who don't even know about the service and so can't even ask for help. What do you think?
Well, I could maybe start that this was something that when we thought about our work plan for this 2 years ahead, like for the next 2 years, I think we kind of realized that there's still a lack of like we're not reaching all the people that we should. So we devised a program where we would specifically tackle this problem by contacting individual professors, like could we talk with you and your group. So I can't answer, like give a clear answer to that question, but I think it's like the centralized communications only kind of people only notice that it doesn't go that maybe far into the organization. So I think we realized this problem, and we kind of took action to contact the research directly, and actually that's been a very positive response. Like they want to talk to us, and they are happy to give 30 to an hour of their time to talk about research data management services. So it's not really an answer, but just as a comment.
Yeah, so it's not enough to have a web page and market in that way the services. What about Jen and Reid? What do you think? How do you see the situation?
I see different situations for different services. So if we talk about the data stewardship service, like do people know data stewards in their faculty? I would say after 4-5 years, most of people really know how to reach to their data stewards, how to ask RDM related questions to them. But that's very different. Of course, not every single person in the faculty knows, but I would say majority of the faculty staff, they do know the data stewards. And they know how to approach them. But that's a very different situation, I would say, from centralized other services. Because for the moment, I would say, but in most cases, data stewards are basically the channel for them to communicate or get connected with other university services. That depends really on what they need for their research project. So there are still, we think that some well-established services should be well known by the research community, by the faculties, but that's not the case. We often heard of that. Like we think the data repository services should be well known after really a few years of promotion, but there's still researchers don't really know the key features of the repository service. So that's something was surprised for us to know, but that's also important, crucial. And I imagine the same for several services provided by ICT that's really at central level. Not everyone is aware of that. So there definitely needs more communication. I think that's referred to what Reid mentioned in the recommendation, the partnership building. So how do we connect all the services together, and we should know each other at least, and then we can bring this to the researchers, so they know that. For us, it is still work in progress, I would say. We have good foundation there, but I would say not perfect.
And
Right.
I can really relate to what you're saying in terms of, the building of relationships through those partnerships across campus. We definitely have specific channels where we can make things more apparent. One is the associate deans for research for the different faculty. They really have the ability to get that outreach spread. I think the repository is really a big factor. We want to make sure that people, a large group of people can use this, and that there's a lot of times when what we find out is that people know about it, but they are less familiar with how to use it. And so that's where we're trying to kind of say, like, we're here to help you. You don't have to do this alone. This is a process, and it doesn't cost right now for anything, so that's a good service. I will say, thinking about the challenges and recommendations, that idea of cost benefit analysis is really important to us, given that we're such a small team and such a large university. So there may be groups that are, they have large labs and they have a lot of funding, and they're doing a lot of work that's very specific on their own. And in that case, outreach to them would not be specifically beneficial on both sides. So there is some of that weighing of what's best.
Great. It seems that we don't have time for all the questions, so I'm just picking some here. There was a question about the background of research of data agents or data stewards. What kind of people they are, and do they have a discipline specific or domain specific knowledge? Could you generalize?
I can start with this. For the group that we have that are the full-time staff that really work on the cross-campus services, we may have come from a background where we have very specific knowledge, but I think what we've really tried to do is provide a deep knowledge for the services, the individual services that we do. Like I have a doctorate in information science, so it's very much that, and I think Antti, you do too, that this is very much, this is what we do and this is what we specialize in. And the same for our software developer who has, a deep knowledge, and our curator who has, and we continue that specific education, whereas the faculty really do have that deep knowledge of a specific area.
Right. And I suppose Jen, because your people are in different faculties, they have to have the discipline-specific knowledge from the faculty.
Yeah, so for the data stewards, they first of all, we all have research background that's related to the faculty they work in a way, either content-wise or methodology-wise. So they should be able to understand and communicate with the researchers and about what they are doing. But they're also, of course, even you do really a matching topic with the faculty, but the faculty is very broad, and one department is very different from the other one. So we can't expect one person to be able to understand everything of the research in that faculty. So there is also a lot of on-job learning, getting to know your faculty. That's actually important part of the work on daily basis. We constantly I used to work as a data steward, and now I can also relate to my other colleagues that there are always a new type of research popping up or new subject. But somehow, especially if we take RDM perspective, then we are able to identify the RDM issues without knowing all the details of the research project. So matching background will help, but also the ability of communication and be able to understand, and also the critical thinking to identify, analyze the situation. I think that's the important competencies that our data steward have. And for other colleagues working at different services, they all have a very professional background relating to the topic that's of their service.
Great. Let's see, the coordination within the network. I think Enrico is doing Enrico Clerian from Aalto is doing a good job, and some other people as well who are sort of telling the story how they are doing it in their universities. For thanks for that. Unfortunately, we don't have to go through them all the comments, but check them out before you leave, because there are good hints there as well. How do you communicate within the data steward or data agent network? What are your tools? How do you ensure that everybody knows what is happening and what should be happening?
Well, I can maybe start. So I think the Teams channel is quite handy. Like it's a pretty standard tool. So I'd say that's probably our main tool, and I think it's easily kind of grasped because we all use it. So I think it's been very useful, and we try to have it as a low threshold so people mind asking, and we try to bring in also we try to broaden the network, so you don't have to be a really a data steward or people working in the library services to join the team, so you could ask questions from the data agent. So I think it's cool.
We used to use Slack when we started the team, but now we moved to Teams as well. Basically, now we actually had a discussion about how we should communicate as a team. We just say we use both emails and Teams. So for urgent question, you need an immediate response, send in Teams, smaller questions. But if it's a bigger request or have more impact to multiple people, and you don't need a really urgent request, sending through emails. We are still fine-tuning the way we communicate, but those are the main two channels.
It is really interesting because we also use Teams, specifically with the group that I'm managing and working with. We basically use email because it's just the quickest way for us, because sometimes people aren't necessarily looking at Teams because it does provide some of the distractions. So that's kind of how we work. But also then we have our weekly meetings where we talk as well. And I'm in the office with some people, so sometimes it's knock on the door and say, "Hey, I've got a question."
Right, great. What about career prospects for data stewards? You already said something about it, but do you want to elaborate? Is it something that we could say to a postdoc that this is something you should look at, and you will get employed after sort of starting the career here? What do you think?
I can say something. I think it's definitely because now in open science, we also emphasized about team science. And I think RDM professionals is so crucial actually to contribute to research activities. But to what I know, I also work with a lot of people here in the audience in RDA working group on career track for data stewards. And we also have a network. I also see many people here in the coordinator meeting group that we talk about the career path. I think it's very new. It's all starting. There isn't any really clear long-term path yet. There are some small steps there, but it's hard to say there is already a well-established career path for RDM professionals. But this is also something as a community we should work together on this to bring up, gather the voices and build up the cases and propose in the future. And also how to engage with the early career researchers to tell them this also could be an alternative path for them in academia. So I would really like to shout out to Rosa and Christine. Also, I see in the audience, they are from KTH. They really have a brilliant ideas to propose to actually pay extra time for PhDs to do RDM work alongside their PhD trajectory. So basically, then we have a pool of professionals on the topic, and it's also a great way to show that there's also alternative path in career, in academia, academic career path. I know they are working on this, and this message also has been sent to other people, and many people get interested in this. So I hope we can further disseminate this message. Hopefully some policymakers will pick it up and then do something with this. So that's a small step for the next.
Right. Great. I don't. Your answer was so comprehensive that I won't ask the others. But now the last question: what is something very, very brief answers? What is something that you are very proud of in the either data stewardship activities or in RDM services in general in your university? Let's start with Reid. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Let's see. There's a lot of things that I just love about working with researchers. But one of the things that has been really beneficial, I think, to all of us, and something I'm very proud about is our National Institute of Health. We have the new data management and sharing policy for the researchers. And so one of the things that we've been doing is a lot of collaboration across campus. And that's been particularly challenging, but I've been able to lead that group in some ways, and we're really starting to develop some ways of working together. Great.
What about Yen? Are you going to be the next?
I'm very proud of two things. First, I think in TU Delft, we're very lucky. We have our university management, the board, was very supportive with data stewardship initiative. So that's something I feel lucky that we work in such institution with such strategy and mindset. And on daily basis, one thing I'm very, very proud of is the relationship the data stewards team established with the researchers. So we really have a very close and very good connections with the research community, and researchers trust the data steward. They come to us, see us as really a good advisor or good colleague or friend. They don't see us as a police, and that's also something we aim to achieve. But so this is really, I would say, big success we have, the really good relationship with the researchers, because eventually whatever we propose in policy and other level, we want the research community environment to absorb and adopt and do this as a norm. So that's a really crucial step to have a good connections with them. That's something yeah, I'm very happy with at the moment.
Great. And Antti, you have the last chance to answer.
Yeah, I like, to me personally, there was a moment of being proud when like I have much respect for our data agents. I think they are really good at what they do, and I never could. I cannot learn the things that they already know in my life. So there's much respect for them. And then there was a thesis done by a student, and then one of the results were that they where they interviewed data agents about the network activities and about their work. So one of the results were that they view the network activities as one of the main sources of their learning within this topic. So that's when I felt that that we were doing something right, because even though they were so good at what they do, we still managed to kind of bring this collaborative learning and learn together about a topic. So that's when I was really proud. I don't know if that was my personal moment, but I think it's good if that's the start. Like if we learn together, then good things will maybe happen, I'd say.
Lovely, thanks a lot. Unfortunately, there are questions that we did not have time to answer, but we did go through quite many questions already. So let's be proud of that. Thanks a lot to everybody, for both the presenters and the audience.